So we're hitting mid-1900s at this point, and anyone that knows anything about anything knows that it was a bunch of civil unrest. So the next couple of figures that we're going to discuss, not only were they involved in the food culture, but their involvement with food could in no way be distinguished from civil rights movements that were happening. And Larry and JERELINE Bethune are a great example of how food culture was brought into civil unrest of the time. Their story comes out of the 1950s, and shortly after the riots and boycotts that ensued after the Rosa Parks incident, they were fully participating in the boycotts of the buses at that time. And so their restaurant had inadvertently become almost like the epicenter for the NAACP and for civil assembly in general. Now, the discussion around the Bethunes is important because not only do you have to consider where Black people were able to assemble in these times of civil unrest, the whole conversation of civil rights and equal rights had now been catapulted to a national conversation after the Rosa Parks incidents. But one of the major obstacles and something that facilitated the oppression of the Black community was that they were illiterate. Not being able to read and write, they could not vote. Not being able to vote meant you didn't have a voice. Not having a voice meant you were silenced. And so JERELINE actually turned her restaurant into a learning center where she emphasized learning to read so you could vote, so you could get your rights. Miss Bethune's passion is documented in her grandchildren's writings, where they speak of the importance that she put on the Black community having a role in not being oppressed, and they needed to vote. They needed to read because they needed to vote. And I think that even though this was happening in the Jim Crow era, where voter suppression was at an all-time high, I think unfortunately we're still able to see instances of when voting procedures are not created equally. Accessibility to voting isn't always equal. And even the access to information, political information isn't even equal. So even if you can access the voting polls, how much information are we getting? We've got limited parties to choose from. Either way, any way you pick, the conversations need to be had, and without being able to be a part of the conversation, you're left out of the conversation. The important thing is that gets portrayed is that Miss Bethune, that the Bethunes in general, greatly contributed to the Black community's ability to assemble in a time of civil unrest, and they did this through their food establishments.